Good morning, everybody. So we're working on the next knife, and I was getting the forge jitters, meaning, well, if you forged, you understand. I was getting withdrawal symptoms, man. I was waiting until I sold a knife to order more steel, and I did sell a knife for 125 early last week, so I ordered more steel on Wednesday, and thinking it had shipped Thursday morning, Thursday afternoon. It didn't. Okay, probably shipped Friday. It didn't. Coming USPS, so could have shipped Saturday morning. It didn't. Monday was Columbus Day. They're closed. It finally shipped on Tuesday. I should have it tomorrow. And I got enough order to make about my next 8 or 10 knives, so hopefully this won't happen again. But anyway, so I always make a plywood template anyway, and that's what you're looking at. And while I was shaking and withdrawing, waiting on steel for the blade, I went ahead and forged a D-guard that you can see there. So I cut the slots in the D-card for the blade. This is 1/4 inch plywood, and it's 1/4 inch steel. That's like 0.1978 steel. It's going to be close to 1/4 inch. So make 1/4 inch slots, and this is 1/4 inch plywood. So I got to, it's just old scrap plywood that I usually use, and it helps that way. I don't waste steel. When I get the template to fit the D-guard just perfectly, then I use that to lay out the steel. So anyway, that's where I'm at with it, and hopefully tomorrow I'll be forging a blade. So stay tuned. Okay, now I can mark right where the scales go. And I'm going to have to adjust the steel just a little bit back here from the template. And the scales will end right there. So now I can go ahead and get some scale blanks of some kind made up. I haven't decided. I do have some bone, which would look cool, but I just did a bone one. I don't like repetition. Everything's one of a kind, so I think I'm going to do something other than bone. I haven't decided what yet, but I'm going to go looking in the woods, looking in the wood pile, see if I can find me some burly, gnarly something or other, and yeah, we'll see what we come up with. What do you think of that? I never heard of using grapevine, but that's different. Going to have to experiment with this a little bit and see what it's like. Yeah, that's kind of interesting. It's, as it turns out, pretty green, pretty wet inside. I thought it was a dead one, but it wasn't. It's pretty green and wet inside. But you know what? I might just lay that in the shop and on down the road. It might be kind of cool to use, but we'll see. Alright, so that continues for this one. There's one side fit in. I just got to shape it now. Stay tuned. Okay, so that's roughed in as close as I can do it till I get the blade steel. And I'll do the other side. How that feels so far. It needs a little more shaping, a little final touches, but it's gonna be pretty good. Okay, I'll be back with blade steel soon, I hope. Okay, so I finally got my blade steel. 2 days late, past the estimated shipping date, but oh well, I won't buy there again. So, I'm shaping the handle, and then I will forge the entire blade on the anvil. I gotta kind of custom fit and shape this handle area for the guard. So anyway, I'll be back here when I start forging that blade. Oh, one thing I wanted to mention, it has a date stamp in it, and that was disclosed in the eBay ad. I was hoping I could bury it in the handle or maybe grind it off, but as it turns out, I can get it buried in the handle. So, anyway, there you have it. I'll be back. Okay, so now the guard, the D-guard, is kind of custom fit there. And this gets peened over here in the back eventually. I think that's pretty good. When it's hot, I'll tighten this up just a little bit here. And so now we have to draw this out, and I'm kind of curious. Yeah, trying to film and do everything. Anyway, kind of curious how much that'll extend that. That would be about an 11 1/4 inch blade right now, and that's front of the D guard to the tip. So see how long I can make that drawing this out. You know, I got a lot of steel here I can draw out and lengthen that blade. So we'll see how much I add there. So we're about ready to start banging some iron. A little homemade kill there out of a semi-truck brake drum. And a $3 hairdryer from Goodwill is the blower. And it does plenty good enough. Okay, I'll start heating her up. Okay. Okay. Okay, so you get the idea. The rest of it's more of the same, and I won't bore you to just keep watching that, but you see how I started getting the shape of the knife and draw out to the tip and kind of forge the clip in there, the top front clip. And so I'll be back here with more progress and show you what it looks like in the end there. As I got it sitting here in this vise to cool down, and then I'll drill it in. Well, of course I got to clean it up and shape the edge, bevel it on the grinder, and it's got quite a ways to go. But then after I do all that, then I'll heat treat it. So out of curiosity, let's see here if I can do this one-handed. Just curious how long that blade is, because we measured, starting out it was 11. Hold on a minute, I'll be back. I gotta lock the tape open. Okay, so before we drew that out, it was about 11 1/4. And now it's almost 13. So we gained about 1.5 inches on it. So it's about a 13-inch blade. Cool. Alright, now I'll be back here after I work on it a while. So there's the blade drawn out and roughed in a little bit, and the guard fitted, and of course this end here gets peened over eventually. So now I gotta shape it and grind it and get an edge, a rough edge on it, and drill for the scales, and then we'll heat treat it. So stick with me. So I haven't been videoing all this, but I have the blade, you can see it kind of down in there. The blade's all shaped, and it was cleaned up, and the holes were drilled in the tang, see that, and the end of the tang was peened over at the back end of the guard, the D-guard. So right now I'm heating her up to heat treat, and we do an oil quench. There's the oil sitting there ready. It's not WD-40, it's just a WD-40 can. That's just regular motor oil in there. So anyway, we'll quench it here in just a minute. I'll be back. So here we go with a quench. That's not hot now. Okay, so now we'll do the quench. Here we go. Okay, and when that happens, I got a wet towel. Now we're cooling down from heat treat, and I should mention this, the way I do these in the back, of the tang. I actually have a little MIG welder, and I tack weld that, and then while it's still red hot from weld, I peen it down. So that's a good strong joint. It looks like the originals that they just peened, but I think it's a little safer that it won't ever loosen up if I weld it, so, or just tack weld it. So that's what I do. So trying to make a best quality knife I can make here. So the next step after this cools completely down, it goes back in the oven. Well, first I scrub it off with Dawn dish soap good so there's no oil on it. Then it goes back in the oven in the house at 400 degrees for about an hour, and then it's let to just air cool, and that brings it from the real hard brittle state. It tempers it a little bit to bring it back still hard but not brittle. So anyway, that's the next step, is it goes in the oven after it's cool. So and then we'll clean it all up, and we'll talk in here in a little bit. So here we are now. I got an old toothbrush here I used to scrub the oil off the knife with, and you know, it's probably best to do this when nobody's home, if you know what I mean. But anyway, so that's the case. So I'm going to have at it here. I got the oven preheating. I'm going to actually do this one at 450. This is a little heavier, a little bigger knife, so I'll put it in there at about 450 for an hour, bake away. I'll be back with a hot knife. Okay, so that's been in there an hour at 450. So now we shut the oven off, and we'll just leave it lay there on the rack to cool. Let the oven and the knife and everything cool down to room temperature by itself. So let the cooling begin. Stay with me. Okay, so it cooled down in the oven, and for these Civil War style knives, I've got a special little process that I go through to sort of age the blade, and I'm not willing to share that, I'm sorry. But anyway, but what I will say is a lot of guys just etch them in vinegar. I think you boil the vinegar, and when the vinegar's still hot, you put the blade in it, and they look pretty good. But I happened to discover another process that I like a little bit better, and I hate the smell of vinegar. So anyway, that's what I do, but it's a little different. But you can just etch them in vinegar if you want. So anyway, this thing's all ready for epoxy and scales. So I need my hands, and I'm here alone. So I will just video, I guess, after each little step, each little process here. So stick with me, I'll be right back. Be quick. That's 5-minute epoxy, and the tang is coated on one side with it, so I'll be back. Okay, so one thing that I do that's a little different than I see a lot of other people do is I glue the one scale on the one side and clamp it and let that epoxy cure, and then drill my holes, and then I'll epoxy the other scale on the other side, clamp it, and then I can through drill from the side that's already drilled. So it's, like I said, it's 5-minute epoxy, so I'll let that sit like, I don't know, maybe a half hour, and make sure it's cured good, and then we'll drill it, and then we'll do the other side. So stay tuned. Be right back. So while that epoxy was curing, I went ahead and cut 3 pins. That's just 3/16 bar stock from any of the big box stores, and I have brass, but For these old Civil War style, I like using the regular steel pins. So after the scales are cured, then I put lots of epoxy in the hole and epoxy those pins in and grind them off smooth. So you'll see all that here shortly. So now that epoxy's cured and I drilled through the tang and through the that scale. So now we'll glue the other scale on and drill it back through from the other side. I don't know if you can see that. The sun's glaring, so I can't really tell on the camera here very well if you can see that. But that side's all covered in epoxy, and we'll put the other scale on now. So the epoxy is all set, and I've through drilled the holes, and I'm ready to put pins in. So I got to mix up a little more epoxy and set those pins. Okay, so the pins are set. That one's not quite to the surface, but that'll get taken down a good bit, so it'll be fine. And I got to start shaping it. Now I'm going to start out on the belt sander, but most of this shaping will be done by hand. So I can't film all that while I'm working, but I'll show you here when I get little progress. Okay, so that's been shaped partly with a belt sander, belt grinder with like 36 grit on it, just to rough it. And then 80 grit on a dowel rod. And now I'm going to go to 220. Yep, 220, and then I go 800 and then 1,000. Even on the wood, right down to try to get like a polish on it before I oil it. So I'll be back here in a little bit. About an hour of sanding with a 220, and now we'll go to 800. See you shortly. Okay, there's 800 grit, and it's starting to get a little bit of a gloss to it. Super smooth. So now I do 1,000 grit. See you in a minute. 1,000 grit's done, and I just wipe the whole thing off with alcohol to get rid of all the little dust stuff. You can use paint thinner or anything like that, but what I like about alcohol is it dries almost instantly. So I think we're ready to put some oil on there and see what it looks like. Just use boiled linseed oil, and I put it on with my fingers, let it soak in. That's my helper Joe there playing with his ball. Alright, I'll put some oil on there and show you in a minute. This looks pretty. Yes, it does. Every now and then I make a knife I end up hating to part with, and I think this might be one of them. And it's gonna look nice. So I'll let that soak in and dry a little bit, and I'll do a couple more coats, probably 4 or 5 coats all together, rub in between. So we'll be back here in a little bit. Now we're going to put the final edge on this. If you have one of these sharpeners, I discovered something that'll help you. The stones get really covered in, you know, a real fine graphite from sharpening, and they almost get to the point they don't cut, they don't do anything anymore. And I discovered you can clean them off with alcohol. And these stones have been used a good bit and were just pure black with graphite on that face, and they cleaned off like that. So I start off with I believe it's about a 200, and then a 320, and then a 600, and then a 1500. So I'll go through the process here, and I like this sharpener. It works real well, keeps the angle consistent, and puts a nice edge on them. So anyway, I'm going to go work on this a little bit, and then I'll be right back. To mention, I sharpen these knives with a fairly steep angle, the bigger knives like this especially. And the reason I do, it doesn't cut up as far on the blade, and you won't get quite as sharp of an edge, but you'll get a lot more durable edge. So if you're going to use this somewhat as a machete, you can chop wood, chop a limb in half with it. That edge will hold up a lot better and need sharpening less often with the steeper angle. If you want a razor sharp knife, you need to go shallower, cut up higher, but you're going to end up sharpening the knife a whole lot more often. And once that's done, you can't put steel back on. So if you want it steeper, or actually shallower, a thinner edge, you can always put it on there, but once you put it on there, you can't put it back. So that's why I do what I do, and it's a good durable edge, and it's very, very sharp, but a lot more durable than if it were just or if it were a thin edge. So anyway, that's why I do that. That side is done. Now we'll go to the other side, and you can see what I'm saying about the graphite that gets on the stones. They get just almost, well, you can see the shine there. See how smooth they get? So you clean that off with alcohol and it goes back to cutting an edge again. So anyway, get the other side done. Alright, so there it is. That's going to go on eBay. It is, let's see, it's October 17th, 2017, I believe. And that'll be on eBay today. You saw how much work it was, and you saw the quality that went into it. So there's your chance to have a good quality, nice Civil War style knife. Got all my helpers. Thanks for watching. See you next night.